Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Thank you so much for bearing with technology this morning. It's really great to see you. And this is our last call of April for our call for community solutions. And we're really excited to be joined by folks from the Southwest PA Municipal Project Hub, Brittany Reno and Megan Ziegler. I am really excited that they're joining us because we've had a series of conversations and just looking at the opportunity that really exists and can be maximized because the Municipal Project Hub exists is huge. And so making that connection directly to member organizations, figuring out where each of you can fit into either funding or partnership opportunities is really the impetus of the call this morning. Before I get too far into the intros, though, I do want to turn it over to Fred Brown. At this time, we have had 5,165 meetings and 44,137 participants on these calls for community solutions. And that's been since March of 2020, pretty soon after he joined us as president and CEO. So in terms of leading conversations with the community, Fred, I want to turn it over to you really quick to key up the conversation this morning.
Thank you, Emily, Megan, and Brittany. It's great to have you guys on. Me and Brittany spoke a couple weeks ago, I guess now. We were sitting at a table together, and we had a really robust conversation about a paradigm shift in how we do our work and how we really are intentional about building sustainable relationships. This once-in-a-lifetime opportunity as a result of the Biden administration and where the federal government is at presents a unique ecosystem, one that we've never seen before. And this hub creates an opportunity for strategic and pragmatic funding and support, and more importantly, regenerative opportunities to partner. And what I mean by that is, if we're able to move beyond the transactional and look at where money has historically went and what it has supported, how does this look and function differently to create ways that the resources that are garnered support an ecosystem of people in Southwestern PA as an ongoing process? How do we rethink, reimagine, and re-establish partnerships that go beyond being driven by particular interests to being driven by the opportunities that exist in those particular areas? And so I'm excited to hear what Megan and Brittany have to discuss today, but moreover, I'm excited about how we move forward and take the next steps in the process to create what I would call a regenerative ecosystem based upon this once-in-a-lifetime resource. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Fred. And Brittany and Megan, I'm going to turn it over to you early because you're going to give a much better introduction to the hub than I could. So if you wouldn't mind kicking it off. And as folks are joining, please add your name and organization to the chat so Brittany and Megan know who's in the room. And as we're thinking about that intentional partnership opportunity, we can reach out with this call as a catalyst for some of those conversations. And if you have any questions, please feel free to add those to the chat as well. Brittany, I see you're sharing your screen. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry if I crept up on you with that. Hi, everyone. I'm Brittany Reno. I'm the CEO of the new Southwestern PA Municipal Project Hub. Wow, this is so exciting. I've always watched these calls and wanted to, be able to be a bigger part of leading this work regionally. And so this is really how this has happened. I'll talk more about the hub, of course, but I want to introduce Megan Ziegler, who's here. Megan, you want to say hi? Say really quick what you do at the hub.
Good morning. My name is Megan Ziegler. I serve as Chief Operating Officer for the hub. So as we're talking about a lot of our technical assistance, that is primarily my role, and just keeping the organization moving forward.
And keeping me contained, not in a bad way, but in a good way, focused way. So the genesis of the hub is really this massive amount of federal spending coming out of the bipartisan infrastructure bills. And just in general, there's always a lot of money coming out of the federal government in one way or another. And in my spare time, I'm the mayor of an environmental justice community, Sharpsburg, here in the region. And again and again, I was looking with excitement at these funds, but also in kind of a combination of horror and despair at the fact that I didn't feel like any of us were going to be prepared to really go for this money in earnest. So we pitched an idea to the Heinz Endowments with the help of Connect, the Congress of Neighboring Communities. I see Kelly on here, really to say, if we can work together and be strategic about going for these funds, which we know we all need, especially our communities that least have the capacity to go for those funds, then we can return any investment pretty substantially. So we're already working on or supporting $60 million worth of grants in the past 10 weeks or so when we launched. So, and a big part of that is obviously Megan keeping the ship moving, but also just the number of people out there who care about anything. You know, we've got so many huge disparities here that we need to address, especially infrastructure disparities born out of 30, 40, 50 years of deferred maintenance. So we're really about meeting local leaders where they are, especially local government officials, people in the public sector who are, you know, really stressed out about the prospect of not just having to catch up with their infrastructure investments, but also looking to the future and all the new things that our communities should be benefiting from. So we're trying to maximize positive federal investment in Southwestern PA. And, you know, with the history of federal investments, that's not a guarantee that any money that comes down from on high is going to be spent in an equitable way that actually serves the needs of the people in a community. So that's a priority for us, is not just helping whoever comes along first asking for our help, but really being intentional in looking at the places and the populations and the systems that are most struggling under the weight of multiple disparities, whether it's pollution, healthcare access, transportation access, quality and health of housing, schools, etc. You know, I could go on the whole hour. We want to make sure that we're prioritizing fixing or at least moving the marker on things that are really not going to be addressed by the private sector itself. So we coordinate projects, we connect people who are working on projects, whether that's to people in their own community who also care about those things, or people across the region who want to keep working on those things and maybe have felt kind of alone in doing it, all in the service of putting together really competitive federal grant applications. So, and at the same time, expanding all of our shared understanding of what is actually causing these problems at the root and getting down to that level to fix the problems. So we've got a 10 county region footprint. A lot of our projects are starting out in Allegheny, and then we're kind of we're growing from there, because as more people hear about it, they tell 10 people, and it's kind of like a pyramid scheme, only for good. And I would say probably more like a net or an ecosystem, really a network that we're trying to build here, or at least trying to bolster with extra support. So this is a list that goes off the table here. It's supposed to be stacked. It is not, but we're really focused on the Justice 40 communities. Justice 40 designation is a program out of the federal government, out of the Biden administration, that says that these communities should be the priority of our investments in the infrastructure bill. And that doesn't have to mean that the money gets spent there necessarily, but that the benefit of the spending should primarily, or at least substantially, be going to these communities that are disproportionately screwed by a lack of investment. And so these are the communities inside Allegheny County. These are the communities outside of Allegheny County. But really, we're coming alongside anyone, because so many of these communities in our region are dealing with really significant problems, even nationally significant problems. And they don't all necessarily qualify as Justice 40, but we still help them. We're meeting everybody who reaches out to us just to find out, you know, how are you doing? What do you need? How can we help? And we can't guarantee to anyone that we're going to get their project money or that we're going to, you know, get a specific grant, but we can guarantee that we're not going to leave folks behind out of the conversation. We're going to stay in conversation, in community with y'all, and just keep working our way through these issues. So the actual model, we're providing rapid response technical assistance grants. And this can take a lot of forms. So basically, when we're applying to massive grants as tiny nonprofits, or even, substantial nonprofits, or local governments, or even small businesses, the grant applications can be quite arduous. They're pretty big grant applications, and they're really stressful. It's tough to even find one and read the whole thing and understand if you can apply for it, if you qualify as an eligible applicant or not, let alone then actually putting together an application that's going to get funding. Especially in Southwestern PA, we have a lot of little communities, a lot of small, lower capacity local governments. We have local governments with, one staff person, and they are doing 5 jobs, a lot of cases. So we really want to find out what is keeping these folks who most deserve this money, who most need this money, from successfully applying to these grants. And a lot of times it's help. It's capacity and help that they need. And so sometimes we are paying for a grant writer just to fully understand the notice of funding opportunity that's out there, to go and do all the little work that needs to be done. Sometimes we are paying, we'll be paying engineers, architects, hydrologists, economic impact analysts. We've just released an RFQ, and I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit here, but essentially we are adaptive by design to try and be able to meet whatever that need is when a great grant opportunity comes out. And right now, there are so many application or opportunities for funding coming out, and they are just cascading over the region, with not many people even able to find it in time to say, hey, I want to go for this. So we're trying to, on one hand, look at the opportunities that are coming down, but on the other hand, just studying deeply the biggest disparities that are existing now here that we can focus on addressing through these grant applications. Because sometimes people will come to us with a grant opportunity that they think is important, that they want to go for. That's fantastic. Other times we have to be intentional at the hub in thinking through those issues that are not likely to get solved or not likely to get tackled at scale without our intentional, looking into an opportunity and then building out a project to support that with the communities who we know most need those funds. So we help with a little bit of everything. It's not us, one by one helping with everything. It's really, we're trying to grow a more robust network and an ecosystem that can endure after this weird period of awesome time, or bizarre time, interesting times, maybe is the best way to say it. So we've done some energy audits for buildings. For a community center is one case that we're working on right now, where the energy audit service for a building this large is about $10,000. Foundations weren't going to be able to respond quickly enough to position this project to be able then to go for $10 million in federal funding. That's when we're able to step in and say, hey, show us if you've got a preferred person you're working with, show us their qualifications, let us know the price, essentially the quote, and we can deploy that funding in a week or two, which changes the game. And then when they don't have to worry about getting that little pot of funding, they can then start focusing on the bigger picture thing, and we can deploy a grant writer at the same time to go after the bigger grant, knowing that energy audit's results are going to come in as well. All right, Megan, it's your time to talk about RFQs. This is for consultants, really, and service partners in the nonprofit sector as well.
Right. So one thing that we did just release last week is our request for qualifications. And this is anyone who can provide services for communities. So we are still going out into communities, figuring out what a lot of those needs are. But based on what we've been hearing so far, it has been grant writing. It will be community facilitation. It can be architectural services, engineering, building sciences, some of those building audits, the energy audits that we were just talking about, and even project management. So one of the things is if people get these really big federal grants, one of the things that people need is that capacity to actually manage it, because there are a lot of stipulations and that go along with those. So we want to just make sure that we are providing all the resources that we need for this. So this is a rolling RFQ. We didn't want to do like a typical 4 to 6 week open window. Here's your one shot. We were very intentional on that, knowing that we want to make sure that we are pairing the right community with the right services and the right team. So this is a link on our website, and we can put that in the chat just so you have it too. So if you have any skills, or even if you, and one of the things, if you don't see your specific skill sets, we do need those lived experiences when we're thinking about what we really need with community. So please just submit something to us just so we know that you're interested, and we can make sure that if there's a good need in a community that we think you would be helpful and you want to participate, we would love to hear from you. So I will put that in the chat for y'all. But yeah, we're really excited about this. We just released it last week. So
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, and to be clear, these are for paid work opportunities. We think it's very, 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 very important that people start getting paid what they're worth around here. So that's something we're looking at is, not just what are people asking for, but, are the things that people are asking for equitable? And I suspect that we're going to be bumping people up to what they're worth more than we're going to be cutting people down to size, It's a great opportunity for people to meet each other. It's a great opportunity for people to maybe people who have admired each other's work from afar for a long time, to bring them together and get them talking, get them generating ideas together, get them sharing what they've learned and what their experiences have been across any number of the issue areas or the places where we're working. So we don't have on the line today our Director of Collaboration and Community Engagement, Eric Macadangdang, who is brilliant and lovely, but he is all about connecting the people and connecting the projects to each other. And so he really works to be the front-facing line of welcoming people into this situation here, this ecosystem, which we really do see as everybody's already in this ecosystem. You're already here. The question is what you do with where you are in this moment. And so we see the intake form for projects as really just a quicker way than waiting for us to meet with you. And we will meet with everybody, but it takes a while to get through everybody, it turns out. But the project intake form is great because if you already have a project in mind that you're really stoked about, you can enter it in here. And especially if you have a grant opportunity, a federal grant opportunity that's coming up fast, and you don't have time to wait 2 or 4 weeks for us to meet with you in person, you can put that in and we'll see it on the back end as, oh, this deadline is coming up in the next 3 weeks, so we better jump on this really quick. And it can be as concretely defined as, I've got a project, it's ready to go, I found a federal grant opportunity and I want to go for it, what's next? Or it can be, on the other end, I have a crappy, dangerous intersection in my town and I don't know what's wrong with it, but something's got to be done. Because we want to lean in wherever you are and help you think through what's next or what your options are. Especially when we have a local government official who's going to be responsible every 12 months for slicing out of the budget, important things that a government needs to be offering people. So this is really Eric's bread and butter, is working with people, working with organizers to understand where their energies might be needed as it relates to projects, and then just supporting people and connecting people and telling them that it's okay. It's okay to not be perfect. And then we've got someone really exciting starting in a week here as the Director of Systems and Community Research, because like I said, we can't guarantee that we're going to get every single grant. We can't guarantee that we're going to get every project the funding that it needs, but especially when these issues are bigger than one community, bigger than one organization, we want to be leaning in with intentional research capacity to really dig into what the specifics are underlying the problem. So, you know, maybe you have a crappy intersection, but what are the properties around it? What are the stormwater flow patterns? What are the bike pedestrian infrastructure situations? Who owns the roads? And sometimes it's, you know, an intersection can have 3 different owners at different parts of the roads, and that makes it really hard to coordinate. We, as an organization, have a mission in part also to be making systems change recommendations. So getting down to the nitty gritty of what the experience is like as a local government official who's just fallen into this role, doing it as a layperson, trying to figure out, you know, the million different intersecting dynamics of a community, and also making decisions, you know, every other week that have long-term ramifications. So not, we want to be looking not on the 2-year scale of impact or even the 5-year scale of impact so much as we want to be looking at the 10, 20, 50, 100-year scale of the impacts of the decisions that municipal officials are making, and help them at least make more informed decisions. So we're never going to tell people what to do. It's not our role. But what we can do is say, if this is a question that you are having, if this is an unknown that is making it harder to confidently make a decision for the people you represent, what things can we research, what best practices, or which actually successful models or which disastrous models can we look up and see what the long-term ramifications of these decisions are, and at least make sure that our officials are making decisions, you know, not just based on fear or scarcity or the immediacy of an issue, but also with the you know, knowledge of how that decision might play out in the long term. And then how can we backwards plan and go from there? I'm trying to move my slides and they are not moving.
I think that was it. We were just
Oh, that's the end of the slide. Okay.
Yeah.
That's why it's not moving. All right. So I'll get out of that, but I'll wrap it up here, and definitely leave room for questions. But we really are just looking across the entirety of society as it relates to the communities in our region, and especially when we're looking at public systems that impact multiple communities, even in different ways. We want to dig into that stuff, and we're going to keep digging into that stuff. And so sometimes we hear from state officials or state agencies, federal officials, federal agencies saying, you know, oh, we've got this pot of money coming out, it's going to be block granted out, start thinking about this, this, and this. Sometimes it's straight from the grants.gov notice of funding opportunities list, and we see, you know, a grant about maternal health, and we're like, okay, we know we need to develop something for that. And we're looking at the maps to see where those issues are hitting the hardest, and then going from there with who we know and who we don't know, to figure out what kind of solutions we can propose together. So I think that's quite enough of me talking for now, but happy to hear any questions or any conversation, or of course follow up with us anytime. If you go to Southwestern PA, SWPAHub.org, you'll see our email addresses, but definitely getting your project in as you have them to the project intake form will be a faster way to get us in the loop. Thanks, y'all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you. And I saw a lot of responses from folks in the chat. I'm going to get the 2 kind of like logistics questions out of the way. Would you mind committing to sharing the slides as a follow-up so I can send these out in our newsletter on Friday, because I think and I could see the faces on camera with all of like the wheels spinning as you were sharing a bunch of opportunities, and you know, I'm somebody who tends to be in a meeting and then things like 30 minutes later hit for questions I should have asked.
We'll put our email address on these as in the URL as well. But these are the slides of the people for sure.
Thank you so much. And then in terms of like immediate partnerships and some of the questions, John shared something in the chat and it was around the alignment with like CDCs or other grant writing opportunities. Could you share a little bit more about how those partnerships operate, or, you know, if you need any like support in terms of connections made for partners to get information out? You know, the folks on this call would be a really great network to lead into.
Yeah, I'll let Megan talk a little bit about the nonprofit work, because truly we're working on public sector solutions as much as possible. So when we can have I ran a CDC for 8 years and I know how powerful they are, especially in places where the local government doesn't have capacity. So like right now, most of our grants are with nonprofit organizations, and some of them are community development or community-based organizations. I think the sweet spot as we continue to get our legs under us and build out this ship that we've already taken off on is getting to the place where, you know, we have community development orgs working with each other across the same issue that they're caring about, working with, you know, their elected officials who have that lever of public accountability tied into them that a private organization doesn't. Theoretically, I think that's something important for us, is because we are trying to move fast and with such big quantities of money, it's really important that we have a public sector, you know, engagement with this, so that it's not just people operating outside of the bounds of democratically elected officials. But Megan, talk about the nonprofits we're working with so far.
Yeah, well, the one thing I did want to say is, yes, in a lot of our work doesn't preclude us from working with nonprofits, especially because it all depends on the particular grants and who is actually eligible. And so a lot of times, sometimes the local government has to be the applicant, and then other times that's not always the case. So it can kind of go both ways. So specifically, I saw like there were some about affordable housing. So there is a lot happening that is coming through HUD for weatherization work, but it is focused on multifamily. So there are 3 new programs, the green and resilient. So there was 3 different lead elements, and I think the comprehensive that all have different ones. And so that is one thing. So we have been working with a lot of council of governments, because that is like a way, if we're trying to reach 550 municipalities across the 10-county region, it does become a little overwhelming. But we've been trying to be very targeted on where we're reaching out within all those communities, because there are, you know, while we are working with everyone, we do have a focus on Justice 40 communities. And so trying to prioritize each of those pockets across the 10 counties. So we have been working with Council of Governments. We have been working with food nonprofits. We have another application, but for weatherizing for homes that's going in with a nonprofit lead. So it really just depends on what your priorities are, what your focus is, and what the particular grant is.
Makes a ton of sense. And then the other question also from John was looking at funding and building affordable housing. Could you speak a little bit to the intersection of the influx of funding from the infrastructure projects and what that might open up for housing specifically? Because I know that that's a pressing need in all of these areas that you're identifying infrastructure supports being needed as well.
Megan, do you want to take that?
Sure. I mean, again, it's for specific grants. If it is, so far there hasn't been, I haven't found any that are coming up right now for new affordable housing, but I'm keeping my eye on all of them. So right now there's a ton of transportation grants that just came out. There's a lot with workforce development that CCAC I just learned is going to be lead. So I'm going to lean in and see what I can do to help support that application. So it is running the gamut, but again, as affordable housing is part of the priority. I mean, I think the county right now, with them hiring a director of housing for the first time out of the county executive office, like that's going to be huge for our region. And now that we have an economic development person who does come with a community development background, I think we're going to start to see a lot more prioritization happening across the region on that. So whether that's moving forward, there's choice neighborhood applications happening in McKees Rocks, both in the north side the Hill District is underway right now. Our obviously Larmer is a great example. I think I saw Miss Donna on the Jump On. Fred was involved with that back in the day. So just keeping that momentum, the region has been very successful on moving some of those forwards, but I'm definitely paying attention to the HUD applications as they come get released as well.
And I saw a question early. I at least saw part of a question pop up about the long-term goals, and I neglected to mention that right now we've got a 2-year pilot vibe going on here to see really to prove or demonstrate that this is a worthwhile service that is not adequately being offered to the poorest communities. Right now we see a lot of community development being driven by developers, which, you know, we need all sectors involved, but what we don't need is our communities compromising in this moment when the need and the disparity is so great. So it's something that I think prepares us to go the mile, if this is more beneficial than just 2 years worth of time, is looking really intently at the, you know, the things that should be able to be done better in the public sector that have been kind of cratered out in different ways over the last 30 to 40 years because of perceived scarcity or real scarcity around resource access. And so something that we do when we do these great little projects, and I don't mean to call them little, but, you know, in the scope of a 10 county region or a national, international system that they're operating in, we want to do these awesome local projects that demonstrate that they can be done and really quantify the cost of doing those projects right, which is not cheap, and it's cheaper to do them wrong than it is to do them right. So every time we do a great local project, we also want to be tying in that bigger picture, that longer term solution, and looking at, you know, how can we set up the public system to be building more housing that is affordable, or how can we make it easier for the long run for all of us to be trying to do this, even if and when this federal money runs out, we want to leave healthier and more productive systems from the work that we've done.
I had a couple questions,
Hit
and
us.
I'll just put them all together so you guys, I'm quite sure some people will have these questions as well, but if you could help define for people on the call, how do you guys define organizations in need? 2, are you guys pursuing any EJ grants? 3, or supporting EJ grants, I should say. 3, are you guys supporting green infrastructure activities such as building EV chargers and stuff like that? 4, are you guys supporting the effort to reduce leadership processes given the scope and depth and breadth of the work you're working on? Is there a focus on AI through this endeavor? The next one is, does any of this work support the development of global business development? And then the last one is, you guys spoke to it, but what is how do you guys look at in the effort to support what's already there and not duplicate that? How do you use the resources you guys have to build more coalitions that survive beyond this resource, because the resources are infinite?
That is a whole series of great questions that I'm not sure you lumped into one in true Fred fashion, which I love. I think, okay, let's see here. So 1, there's enough work to be done that we definitely and absolutely don't want to be duplicating efforts that are already at work in the region. And we know there are a lot of them like this one right here. So whenever an entity is doing something great for the region and the people who it's serving say, yes, it's great and it's doing great and nobody needs any more help, we're like, okay, fantastic, great job. And we'll start referring some people who could also benefit from that to you. A lot of times it's people are doing great things already and but they're like, man, we really need some support. Man, we really need more capacity. Man, we need some people on the ground who are actually going out and knocking doors and having these meetings and taking the time to build actual relationships with trust with people. So that's sometimes, a lot of times we are seeing activities and needs that are not as profitable being continuously, brushed to the bottom of the to-do list for organizations. Sometimes that's intentional. Sometimes that's just out of necessity of trying to hunt down enough funding to keep an organization running. But the question on, we can't do it all alone, and I don't want to. I hope we don't have to. And so we're really here to meet with the coalitions to really, and to also better incentivize coalition building and coalition work, so that, if we have a choice between, spending our 8 hours a day working on a project that's benefiting one place that's in deep need, or 10 places that are all sharing that deep need, we're gonna, out of necessity, we're gonna need to work on the scaled up project that is benefiting multiple communities being screwed over by the same system, essentially, or being served by the same system. So, but we're also looking at not just the issues that are not as profitable to look at or not likely to be solved by the private sector alone, but also, which issues are in the greatest crisis point here, which issues are like nationally significant, like our Black maternal health outcomes, our air quality issues, our our housing prices are rising faster than any area in the metropolitan region. We have some of our largest employers actively working on AI solutions to outsource their workforce. And so we at least want to be talking about that. We want to be researching the long-term implications and the short and medium-term implications of things like AI, things like, what is the future of work? Why are workers not as protected now as they were 40 years ago? How can we move to a place where humans are being, adequately brought into wealth that's being generated in this time, and also served by the technological advancements, not just displaced by the technological advancements, but actually, seeing the benefits of the technologies that in a lot of cases are developed with public sector support. How are we bringing that benefit back to the public? I don't suspect I answered all your questions. Maybe Megan has some thoughts.
I gotcha. As far as I didn't start writing them down right away, Fred. So if I forgot one, please ask me. As far as direct EJ grants, yes. So we are working with one of the EPA community change grants right now. There is one that is specifically about air quality monitor for underserved communities overburdened by air pollution exposure, which is going to be focusing on monitoring. There are a couple that I have kind of tagged as forecasted that are more like neighborhood access and equity, EJ government to government grant. So there are some that I'm keeping an eye on. There is an application that went in through the Southwest Pennsylvania Commission that is more of a regional stormwater control. It's like a center of excellence that went in last week. As far as green infrastructure, charging, yes, there are two applications working both Duquesne Light and both Westmoreland County and Allegheny County. It is open to all the counties, but that is a local government led, so that will be one that is going in. And then there was a different EV charging one that just came out a week ago, so paying attention to those. Leadership processes, not at this time. That is not something that is kind of within our purview. We are here to kind of be more of a technical assistance provider for nonprofits and municipalities. And then as far as global, I think Brittany talked to AI, and then global business stuff. Again, it's if it's workforce development, if it's trying to work with different agencies doing that work, however we can lead in and support, we will. But I think I got most of your questions. If there was one that I didn't answer, please let me know.
Thank you, Megan. The only one that I didn't get clarity on was the well, two, but you mentioned it loosely, was how do you guys go about defining organizations in need? And
So,
then
oh,
the last one was how do you build sustainable partnerships based on existing assets?
okay, yeah. So I'd say we're not really the ones to define what need is. We want the people who are feeling the need to define what that need is, and then we can work from there. I think in terms of looking at like long-term solutions and more holistic solutions that de-stress everyone who's dealing with this work or who's impacted by the work, we want to be finding areas where, if the areas of shared need that could be addressed with a shared solution is huge for us, because that's really our model is scaling up our strategy and our solutions as a movement to be smarter about what we're doing in terms of like having been an executive director for a one-person nonprofit for 8 years. There are a lot of nonprofits that want more on the ground support or want a person who's doing research. They don't necessarily all need a full-time person doing that in a lot of cases. And so if we can get a sense of what those shared needs are and the amount of time we need, each entity needs spent on that time, then we can say, does that capacity need to exist in-house on your back, on your fundraising dime, or can that be a shared capacity that can be deployed around the region as needed? Or are there, a cohort of 5 organizations that want to share this capacity, and then it becomes more sustainable? It's more of a shared lift. It's not so much, just adding another, $100,000 to a single organization's fundraising ask every year. So that's the organizational need question. I'm so sorry, Fred. Repeat that last question again.
The last question was how will you build sustainable partnerships based on existing assets?
Yes. Okay. So again, this is where we come in terms of my hope is that we don't really have our own, that we're not really facilitating these grants so much as we are getting the capacities to the organizations, getting the funding to the organizations that really need it and are doing the work. And this comes down to like, especially when there are coalitions already existing around these topics, when we see those grant opportunities come up, they're the first ones we reach out to, because those are coalitions. Those are groups that are already thinking in systems. They're already thinking bigger than just one place or just one project. They're thinking across the entirety of the system that's impacting the issue and making it an issue in the first place. So the groups that are really, and what's tough though is that the groups that have the capacity to be meeting in coalitions are often the groups that have the capacity to go for grants, or at least are closer to that than the people on the ground, whether it's people with disabilities who are living basically locked into their homes because our systems are so inaccessible physically, or people who are just so far out of the nonprofit industrial system that they're not working on these issues. They're just being impacted by them and trying their best to get through the day. So there's a balance, I think, and this is why we come alongside anybody, and this is why the public is welcome to submit project ideas too, is good ideas come from all over. Expertise comes from all sorts of experience. We really want to be holistic in making sure that all of these perspectives and valuable experiences are included in informing our approach. And even when we see leaders who are, not formally involved in any institution, in any elected office, or just like passionate people who care, who live in these communities, we do want to, meet with them and help them understand where they could plug in to really amplify their impact. We want to introduce them to the nonprofit folks and to the elected officials, the public officials who are serving their community, and build more durable leadership systems, because I know a lot of these communities are being served by, again, lay people making 50, $100 a month to do this work that really feels 24/7 a lot of times. So how can we build that leadership bench just by connecting people and letting them do what they will? That's I think that's the sweet spot. And also when one organization is really focused on one aspect of a thing that directly is impacted by this other thing that has a whole group of coalition work going on, how can we connect those things, give it some connective tissue and help that, supporting the connections, supporting the bridges, all that, because that's when really interesting stuff starts happening in terms of addressing root causes, is when you're talking across things that seemed like silos, but we're actually not and shouldn't be. And we're always looking for thoughts, feedback, and we're designed to change. We're designed to be adaptive so that we can change what we're doing as we learn better how to do it, as we hear better from everyone.
I appreciate that, especially your note in the comment section, Megan, around like collaborating and elevating, not duplicating as much as possible. And for folks on the call, like this is the exact same language and line of questioning that we often get with GPNP, being a coalition, not owning or like duplicating any of these things, but figuring out a way that it can better work together at a systems level. So yeah, I feel you. And one of the capacity building pieces might be like a shared messaging person for the Southwest PA Hub and GPNP, because that's a very a common line of questioning, especially for folks who aren't part of the ecosystem, or I mean, since the hub is new, just kind of on the onboarding piece. But so no additional questions. I just want to thank both of you for joining us this morning. As you'll see in the chat, there are a couple of folks that I want to shout out specifically. Jen Blatz from GPDIA wrote a comment about the broadband funding that's going to be coming down. She facilitated our broadband panel at the summit and has been super engaged with our public policy committee since November. And I mean, I'm really glad to make that connection this morning. And then John Potter, who has some of the questions around housing, is also working on the electric vehicle charging stations and the workforce development side of things beyond some of the infrastructure pieces. So just wanted to highlight those two connections since I've actually gotten questions from both of them about like alignment with the hub leading into this conversation. So again, thank you for both of you spending the time with us this morning. I look forward to continuing conversations with you about future alignment. And then if there's anything that we can highlight, in the weekly newsletter or, in sharing out to members, please let Bree or I know.
Thank you all so much. Keep up the good work.
You too. And Bree, if you would like to launch the poll, we can go ahead and do that now. The policy update / program updates are very brief this morning. So, I mean, last week being the primary election week for primary elections on Monday or Tuesday for Pennsylvania, I'm sure everyone had their eyes on the news looking at the election results. So I'm just going to share my screen and give a very high-level overview of some of the statewide and national updates as a result of last Tuesday. Bear with me here. But so as you know, as we all could have predicted, our presidential candidates are Joe Biden Jr. and Donald Trump. For the Senate race, I think we also were pretty anticipatory of Bob Casey and David McCormick being the Democratic and Republican candidates following Tuesday's election. And then for the other positions that are statewide, the Attorney General, Auditor General, and State Treasurer, there's a lot of history being made for these positions and for these folks. I would highly encourage everyone primary or before the general election in November to start thinking through what these roles and the individuals and their individual skill sets are bringing to them that could either benefit or be difficult and require some education sharing for the nonprofit sector. As we're continuing to move forward with our updated policy agenda, making things more accessible between connecting coalitions, working smarter, not harder, and not duplicating work, but also outside of the nonprofit sector in partnership with government officials, it's extremely important to understand the level of influence that nonprofits should have with our elected officials, being 15% of the workforce in Pennsylvania, which is higher than the 13% that is the national average. So just thinking through, what the results from the primary election actually mean in terms of your existing relationships, and then moving into the election on November 5th, what that's going to mean for some of your budget asks for 2025. Thinking about if you're asking for, support from existing programs, or, your state, your district representative, community project funding, or if it's going to be something a little more coalition-wide with partners across the state outside of the Southwest PA region. We'll be diving into more of that in each of the public policy calls on a monthly basis. So they are, as a reminder, on the third Thursday of every month from 1 to 2:30 p.m. Last week, we had a really great conversation among some experts in each of the different policy areas for broadband, education, environment, healthcare, workforce, to discuss, and mental health, to discuss who is really doing some great work in those areas. Some of the folks on this call were actually mentioned, and figuring out what a feedback loop looks like in practice versus just in theory, throughout Southwest PA as a more connected or deeper rooted network of individuals building up each other's work versus competing for funds. Thinking more long-term about sustainable solutions rather than, point in time funding. And so I think this morning's conversation, hosted by Megan and Brittany, was really timely on the heels of that conversation with our policy committee, because it really does take, all sizes of organizations, all types of organizations. And I think speaking to, what you shared at the beginning is just kind of meeting people where they are and figuring out the correct on-ramp for them into this work, so we can have transformative change at the community level is extremely important. So